Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
We talked recently about small town politics, and Ashen sent me a story. So Steve, check this out from KCTV5, KMOV. Get out of town. Protesters call for Louisiana, Missouri police chief to be fired following overdose incident. Now, you got to understand that the story took place in Missouri, not Louisiana. Well, it was Louisiana, but the town of Louisiana, which is in Missouri. Louisiana, Missouri. Okay? Melanie Johnson wrote the story. A small town in Missouri named Louisiana, for some reason, is seeing big-time problems in corruption. On Wednesday, the community rallied outside of the Louisiana City Hall with demands that the police chief step down or be fired or just get out of town. Louisiana, Missouri is located 90 miles north of St. Louis. This is the worst police department I've ever seen this town have, says resident James Miner, and says that he needs to get out of town. Now, when you say it's the worst police department I've ever seen this town have, is that a real high bar? I'm not sure. The police chief is 50 years old. He was arrested and charged in October with drug trafficking. And that's after two people OD'd in his home. One of them died. The other was revived and apparently lived. And so that is a bad look, as we say, for the police chief. Now, his girlfriend, who is 25 years old, was also charged. The two men who OD'd were her brothers. And so some people might go, Steve, that's an interesting mathematical equation you got there. You got a 50-year-old police chief with a 25-year-old girlfriend. Yes, that is an interesting observation there, my friend. Thank you. During Wednesday's protest, tensions heightened between protesters and the Louisiana police family members as arguments almost turned physical. But they didn't. But they almost did. But they didn't. I've lived here my whole life, and it's never been this bad in this county. Never. It's got people ready to start revolting, says a lifelong resident, Steve Henry. According to the mayor, the chief was previously fired from the Missouri Department of Corrections and was sued while working at the Vandalia Police Department. So the man has what we call a troubled past. But somehow he got hired here. The current chief is wrong in everything that he did, says another resident at the protest. They knew before they hired him what he had been in trouble for before, but they still hired him. Wesley Richardson worked at the jail with Jones before he became head of the police department. For you to come in and then put a damper on Louisiana when you get here, I'm not happy about that. I'm upset about that, says Richardson. The town mayor told News 4 he was kicked out of Wednesday's city council meeting by the council as retaliation for speaking out against the chief. So apparently the city council backs the chief, but the mayor does not. Some of the council members, though, are calling for the mayor to be impeached. Sounds like the Harper Valley PTA. I just got to hold on because I knew what kind of a ride I was going to be in, and I'm right in the middle of it right now, says the mayor. We do have to restore the faith and confidence of our police department and our local government with our citizens. Meanwhile, the police chief is due back in court soon, which, by the way, is not a good phrase. When you hear the police chief is due back in court soon, where he's the defendant, that's often, like I said, a problem. He's on paid administrative leave and remains the head of the police department. I want to know how I can get a job and just be on paid administrative leave all the time. Because they pay you, but you don't have to work. And technically, he's the head of the police department, which would be a job I would think that takes some work, but you are on administrative leave. And I've mentioned before that I lived in a real small town called Bad Axe, Michigan. And I've actually lived in smaller towns, but Bad Axe to me seemed really small, primarily because of a lot of things that happened there. And I am going to give you a couple examples of things that happened in a small town. And for example, I can tell you that one day I had trouble. I was at the time living in an apartment, and my sink backed up. And I hated calling the people who ran the apartment complex because they're often slow. They come out at weird times. I'd go to work and I'd come back and I'd find out they'd come into my apartment to do something and they hadn't told me, and it bugged me. So I thought, you know something, I will simply go to the store and buy myself some liquid plumber or Drano or something, and I'll fix the sink myself. So I go to the store, buy the stuff, dump it in the sink, fix the sink, throw the bottle in the garbage, get in my car and go to work. And I walk into the front door of the radio station. The receptionist looks up and she goes, "Oh, plumbing problems?" I'm serious, plumbing problems? And I looked at her and I go, "How could you possibly know that?" She goes, "My neighbor is a cashier at the store." Now, you'd think that answers the question, but no, it doesn't. Because what this means is the cashier, who I did not know, knew who I was. The cashier apparently jumped on the phone and called the woman at the radio station and said, "Hey, one of your disc jockeys is just in here buying Drano." I also had issues with the mail delivery in the apartment complex I was in because there's a bunch of little kids who lived there. And we discovered that little kids were running over as soon as the mail showed up and emptying out the mailboxes and throwing the mail around. And technically it's a crime, but little kids don't get arrested for crimes in small towns. So I thought, easiest way around this is to get a P.O. box. So I got a P.O. box in Bad Axe, Michigan. So if you want to send me a letter back then, you'd send it to my P.O. box, Bad Axe, Michigan, 48413, I think. I think that's right. And one day, I'm at the radio station, and I walk into the studio, and pinned to the bulletin board is a letter addressed to Steve Lehto, P.O. Box, Bad Axe, Michigan, 48413. Now, the radio station was outside of town. Its address was 935 South Van Dyke. Still remember that too. It was a long time ago, 1982. And I'm baffled by this piece of mail that shows up at the radio station addressed to my P.O. box. So the next day I take the envelope into the post office in Bad Axe, stand in line, walk up the front. I say, "I got a question." The guy goes, "What can I do for you?" I said, "My name is Steve Lehto. I work at the radio station. I have a P.O. box here I pay money for. Someone mailed me a letter yesterday." I put it on the counter and I go, "I was expecting that to be my P.O. box. It wasn't there. I was very upset. When I went to work, 5 o'clock, it was pinned to the bulletin board at the radio station. Apparently it got delivered to the radio station." Guy looks at me and he goes, "Well, it's you, ain't it?" Indeed, it was me. It was me. So, small towns can be interesting places to live. Let's just put it that way. However, when you are the police chief in a small town and you get arrested and charged with drug trafficking after 2 people OD in your house, it's going to be kind of hard to keep that story out of the local news because the disc jockey buying Drano is headline material. This stuff here is gold as far as news stories go. So I have a sneaky feeling this guy is not long for this job. And I understand that the city council might be on his side. But how long can they do that in a town this size? So it is, of course, Louisiana, Missouri. That's the town and the state. KCTV5 and KMOV ran the story. Melanie Johnson wrote it. Ash and sent it to me. But as of right now, the villagers are gathering outside with the proverbial pitchforks and torches, saying, "Get out of town," calling for the police chief to be fired following that overdose incident. We'll see what happens. Questions or comments, put them below. Otherwise, talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. I've told so many lies about my age, I don't know how old I am myself.